Hello and welcome to Noble Mind.
Noble Mind is a podcast exploring mindfulness, meditation, and psychology.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Noble Mind. This is Kate here. In this episode, we brought back Kathryn Lovewell to talk to us more about self-compassion, its applications and usefulness in daily life, and in particular, the benefits of deep practice and the retreat experience. Kathryn Lovewell is an award-winning emotional health and well-being specialist. She is a dedicated mindful self-compassion certified teacher, speaker, trainer, and senior journey therapist who has been teaching meditation and self-inquiry since 2006. Kathryn is the founder of Kind Mind Academy and best-selling author of The Little Book of Self-Compassion, Every Teacher Matters, and her first children's book about self-compassion entitled The Voices in My Head. She continues to deepen her self-development and self-compassion practice through service with the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion, and she provides consistent support for graduates to sustain their practice. You can learn more about Kathryn and get this episode's show notes and join our email list, all at noblemindpodcast.com. We hope you enjoy this episode. We are here today with Kathryn Lovewell from the Kind Mind Academy. Welcome back to Noble Mind. Why don't you maybe just tell us a little bit about who you are for those who haven't heard the previous episode with you yet. We did interview you one other time, so we've got you back today for another open-ended conversation broadly on our themes of self-compassion and practice. But why don't we just head off with telling us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Kate. Hi, Alex. I'm a certified mindful self-compassion teacher. I support the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion. I'm the author of a few books now focused on self-compassion, The Little Book of Self-Compassion, which is a really nice entry-level book to help new people into this topic, just get a gentle toe dip. And then my favorite new book is The Voices in My Head, which I know we talked about. So helping primary age children, aged around 6 to 10, to begin the conversation about those mean voices and those kind voices and how we can cultivate those kind voices. So I absolutely love self-compassion. It's really radically changed the way I treat myself, especially when things go wrong. And so I'm really keen to share this message, as I know you are, to help people's lives be that little bit more full of ease and joy.
I'm really a big fan of your books. Really appreciate the additional value that you have brought to MSC in your explanations. So thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I'm really passionate about making it accessible to the everyday person, perhaps people that haven't read any of the more highbrow academic books, or that aren't necessarily leaning towards learning about Buddhism, or I know it's a secular training, but there's ways into finding a self-compassionate life. And hopefully my books are opening the door to everyday people to say, oh, actually, I don't need to be mean to myself. I don't need to beat myself up to get on in life, to achieve, to feel good enough. We can actually be okay in our own skin just as we are.
I find it very precious that people like you have applied mindful self-compassion to their lives and made it their own. And hearing it from people like you really helps me understand the concept better than just, so that I find that very, very helpful. How is it naturalized, or how does a person live these principles in their life?
Yes, I felt really passionate, along with my co-teacher, Liz Walker. We really wanted to create a community, and we wanted to help that pathway, because starting and you embrace a new learning is great. We want to move it from conceptual to experiential, obviously through the 8-week course. But then it's like, we don't want it to just be another badge. Oh, yes, I did that course in 2021. And then it's left on the shelf, as they call it, shelf development. It's actually, it's about living and breathing it. How do we make it our own? And that's the magic. Chris and Kristen have encouraged everyone that learns this work to make it their own and bring it into real life. And that's what I'm really passionate about. Liz and I really want, as you said, Alex, how do we live this so that it can be something as simple as someone's just pinched the last cookie in the cookie jar and you've got a bit of disappointment or maybe a little bit of frustration. Maybe you react quite inappropriately, all the way to, finding out that you've just lost your job or that you've got a serious illness or COVID's, in the house or all these huge spectrum of challenge in our lives. And of course, self-compassion can meet all of them, whether we've just missed the bus or we've forgotten a document that we needed to bring to a meeting, or like yesterday, I was giving the global meditation and I could not get the technical to work and my camera wouldn't come on. It's never happened before. And I'm feeling embarrassed and I'm delaying the practice. And of course, all we have is a compassionate response when we learn this work. It's like, oh, I don't need to beat myself up about this. This happens to everyone. We all struggle sometimes. And then there's this freedom that happens. And I think one of the biggest things that I'm starting to really experience is that I don't hang on to those embarrassing moments. They don't haunt me for the next day and the next day and the next day. They just fall away. It's like, oh yes, fully human. Here I am hanging out with other fully humans.
Without practicing, it just stays at the level of rumor, I think, because like even the ideas that are repeated, I find that the way it works for me is I live my life, run into some difficulty that's habitual, and then take that difficulty to a session with a teacher. And then I'm reminded, oh, this is suffering. This is how you go about it. Okay. And then when I apply it, then things shift as opposed to just, well, I've heard this idea. That doesn't really do anything.
No, exactly. And it is about practice. It sounds a bit cliched, but we call it practice for a reason. And it's those little moments that actually build on our deeper experience and understanding of how we can offer ourselves a gesture of self-compassion. And of course, it's likened, if you imagine, that little water droplet dripping down onto a rock over time, that solid rock that seems absolutely impenetrable, suddenly, over time, has a really big crack and then a crevice. And eventually, I remember visiting one such rock, I think I was in New Zealand, and they demonstrated, how it had happened. And there was just this great big hole through this really tough rock. And that's truly my experience of self-compassion. We can't get a sledgehammer to being kind to ourselves. It doesn't work that way. It's these small, gentle, tiny gestures over time. And then one day we wake up. I remember a client saying this to me. And she said, oh, I've just realized I don't hate myself anymore.
Mm-hmm. What a gift.
Really, really a gift. And that was my experience. Not to say that the mind doesn't still invite me to notice some imperfections, but I can work with them now. I'd love my body to be different than it is. There's a little bit of chatter that happens with that still. I'd love to not be perhaps such a kinesthetic learner because I feel quite slow sometimes, and that feels embarrassing and shameful sometimes, that I need to practice and grasp something through learning differently to a lot of people. And yet I'm making friends with these aspects of myself that aren't perfect, that may be very different, that may be labeled a disability. And it's okay. Most of the time I can say, oh yes, this too. Yeah, it's magic. It still hurts. I'm still human. There's still, those emotions will come up. And of course, I can be with them as well.
One of the challenges sometimes in sharing these ideas is that maybe people think, well, if I learn self-compassion, then that will be the thing that makes me never feel pain again, right? The thing that makes me never hurt again, instead of, as you're saying, it's a way of responding to the inevitable challenges of life or the inevitable difficulties that arise. That doesn't make it worse.
Yes, exactly. And my first meditation teacher and the therapeutic work I was trained in, kept saying, you don't need to be fixed, Kathryn. You don't need to be fixed. Stop trying to fix yourself. And I'd get really frustrated and cross. I said, are you kidding? Have you seen my life? Have you been inside my head? This is a mess. Somebody fix me. This is terrible. And of course, I arrived at MSc like that too. Absolutely. It's like, great, this is going to fix me now. I will stop beating myself up. I'll stop hating everything about myself that's not good enough. And then I'll be free. And of course, it's the antithesis of that. It's, hello, imperfections. Come in. I wonder, can I make friends with you too? And strong emotions. I mean, I didn't touch anger because good girls don't get angry. That's how I was brought up. And so that was an emotion I was very frightened of, externally and internally. And so it's helped me learn that, even the parts of me that get angry are acceptable. Not obviously condoning violent behavior or hurtful outbursts, but just learning that all aspects of me-ness are okay. It's huge, and that melts away this need to fix. And again, that's back to the water droplet. That's a slow, gentle process.
There's a bunch of things that are very counterintuitive for the beginner, as I'm reporting my own experience, like that. Like, I don't need to be fixed, or accepting myself as I am, as a mess. So these very counterintuitive ideas, as one practices, then over time, they start to make sense. And you realize why the conceptualization was totally the part of the problem. Yeah, and as you're saying, much in the way that physical exercise builds capacities through repetition, like building a capacity to be able to run a certain distance, then you build that capacity in your brain by thickening neural pathways. Then it becomes a real capacity you can use, even if the other alternative may also come to awareness.
Absolutely. Yes, we go to the kindness gym.
I love it.
And we do have to practice. It doesn't come naturally to us, especially if we've been told we have, certainly in the UK, quite a cultural, giving is better than receiving. I must give service to others. And, where do I fit in that? I certainly didn't come on my priority list. The priorities were other people, serving my students, my friends, my family, my community, and so on. And to be included in that's really powerful, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Very different.
Just to be on your own list of priorities.
Exactly. We often talk about, how busy we are, our societal rush. We're just so busy and the list is so long. But how many people actually do include some self-care in their list every day? I have to still actively, I'm not putting myself up as someone that sorted this, but I have to actively diarize. That's going to be a rest. I love, I thrive on getting lots done and it gives me a thrill. I love helping people. I mean, all the classic things that can bring us joy. And I know that I cannot sustain that. Mm-hmm. I learned that as a teacher. And after I burnt out and ended up in hospital, had major surgery, I literally burnt myself out. That I thought, if I'm going to continue this career, how can I sustain being a great teacher, provider, inspirer, and take care of myself, mind, body, spirit? Mm. And that's our challenge, I think, as humans, isn't it?
Yeah, I think maybe it's gotten a little better. I'm not sure, but I know my experience with a, sort of similar cultural background around sort of being engaged and being active and productive and helpful and like all those things really highly valued, that there really isn't even a language around, like, how do I balance this with my needs?
You're quite right. I'll use the phone metaphor. If I do not plug myself in to something that recharges me, then I am no good to man or beast. I have to nourish myself. I need to practice. I have my morning practice with my grads. I tend to my body. I'm listening to my body a lot more. Well, what do you need, body? What is here? And my resistance to rest. I still have huge resistance to rest. That's still one I'm a work in progress. And all these different aspects that we face in our family life, in our work life, our community life. Where do we press pause? You're right, it's not in the language, and oftentimes it's still judged. No, I need to motivate myself. I need to be strong and do more. Actually, what if doing less was kinder?
Right. Could you say more about resistance to rest? How does that show up?
So I know I get that dopamine high from ticking off those things on the list and doing great things for people. And the antithesis of that is pressing pause and just allowing my body to recoup, to rest. We are stimulated 24 hours a day now. If we choose to open our eyes, we can pick up a gadget and it will inform us of something, whether it's the news or playing a game, or we have a neighborhood app, which is fantastic. But my goodness, you can go down a rabbit hole really quickly about the latest butterfly that's arrived, or why a dog's barking, or what's happened with the roadworks up the road. And it continues. That's so when it comes to resting, I really believe in conscious resting, consciously choosing to press pause on activity, on doing. So, we've all heard that phrase, we're human beings, not human doings. Mm-hmm. And yet we do I certainly get a kick from doing stuff and saying, let me announce how many things I did before breakfast. And certainly when I was a young mum, I've done the shopping. I've put 2 loads of washing on. The second one's on the line. I'm just putting that on the line. I've made the kids breakfast and I've already made some Play-Doh ready for the kids. And I haven't had my breakfast.
Right.
That's insanity. And that's the level of drive. And we go into this drive mode all the time. And what I recognize, it's the approving energy. I didn't realize how much I just wanted to prove to the world that I've got myself together. Because of course the quiet voice, actually the very loud voice most of the time, was, you haven't. You better organize the kids' packed lunches, because you don't want them screaming in front of grandpa in case they don't like what grandpa makes them, or whatever that anticipatory stress is. And so when we come to pressing pause on all of that striving and proving and activity, we can then quietly bring our conscious awareness to nourishing ourselves, noticing what rest really means to our mind, body, heart. Sometimes, especially in the last year or so, of course, there's been a huge amount of isolation and depression that's arisen from being separated. Even though we have this amazing technology, it's not quite the same as having a real hug or just sitting on the sofa with a buddy and talking nonsense and giggling and being, it's different. So again, it's bringing our mindful awareness to, what do I need? Our hearts may need a little recharge, or it might be our heads are just so full that we can't take on one more thing. I think that's quite common now, especially for high achievers, people working at home, and they've just all the time. And of course, our bodies can be easily forgotten in our busyness. We don't have time to prepare. I still have resistance to this, resistance to spending time getting the nutritional, real food. It takes time to prepare. And not to make any of the choices anyone makes right or wrong, but it's when we consciously rest, when we press pause and We'll talk about going to silence, no doubt, in a little while. But when we are peaceful, then we can listen. There's a lovely quote that Rumi says, "The quieter you become, the more you are able to hear." And that's certainly been something that has drawn me to silence more and more, because if my thinking mind is busy chattering, even if it's lovely chatter, even if it's not a critical chatter, it's usually a little combination still, there's no ability really, it's difficult to access the heart's voice and that real compassionate voice. And that's why I practice every morning. I meditate each morning so I can just quietly listen. And that's perhaps, hopefully, a little explanation as to why conscious resting is important and why the busy thinking mind might resist that, because the doing stops and the proving stops. And then what does that mean about me?
Yeah, it feels like there's almost like a fear of what you're going to find there that maybe keeps people away from the stillness or away from the rest or the silence. Because when you sit down and plop yourself down, it's just you, that can feel really destabilizing, whether it's, what comes up in your thinking mind or possibly connecting to your body doesn't always feel good when that's new to you, so that fear then keeps us away. And so we flutter away into busyness or other things to get back to what's familiar or comfortable. Like even just sitting in a waiting room and not picking up your phone or a magazine, like, what am I going to find there in those 10 minutes of just sitting there quietly with myself?
You're so right. I think you've hit the nail on the head. We have to fill our space when we're no longer used to just being. God forbid we should be bored. What if we were not stimulated? I'm certainly very aware of my driver that I mustn't waste a moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm learning to make friends with wasted, inverted commas, time. Mm-hmm. So what I used to do is I would squeeze every last minute out of any activity. Oh, I'll just finish that. I'll just get that done before the next meeting, before the next Zoom, before I do that, before I catch the bus, and it would generate so much a fine line between stress and excitement. And that's where our little dopamine fix comes. Like, oh, look at that. I made the bus. Oh, I got that done. But actually what it stops is that slowing down, that ability to be present, that wonderful gift of truly noticing what's really here. And you're right, that's scary for the mind. We don't want to go into the unknown. The mind does not like that. And we certainly don't want to touch any feelings that might be difficult. Because then what? I can't burst into tears when I'm giving a lecture. I need to stay steady. And so the thinking mind says, keep that well away. And this is when, of course, we have lots of other opportunities to avoid what's really here. Let's drink that away. Let's eat that away. Let's social media that away, because it's so easily available to us. So we do really need to be, I believe, making these conscious choices to step towards. Maybe it's uncomfortable. It is sometimes. But to give ourselves the gift of being rather than doing. So we become less heady and more hearty. That's what I say when we're on retreat. We're going to move from this part of our bodies and we're going to come down, all the way down into our bodies and then resting into our hearts. And sometimes they can be really covered up, armored up, protected. So we can just rest by our hearts, and eventually, the iceberg will melt as we just pay it some gentle attention, warm it up.
You mentioned retreats, and we know you've got one coming up. So I would love to hear a little bit more about what a self-compassionate retreat experience might look like, or how one might know one's ready to do such a thing.
The retreat we're doing 9th of August, it begins. It's a 5-day retreat, and it's actually a silent self-compassion retreat. So there's some layers here, but the first step, this retreat is for experienced meditators, people that have been practicing, self-compassion, ideally, that are graduates of the mindful self-compassion training or some, or equivalent, so that it's not too big a jump. We want everyone to feel safe as they step in, towards something that they may have done a 1-day retreat or 2-day retreat and say, oh yes, I think I'm ready, because silence can be really powerful. But I mean, we offer self-compassion retreats that aren't silent as well. And that's, both are guided in such a way that we'll do formal and informal practices that invite us to do what Chris Germer calls the U-turn. So instead of having that outward facing, how can I help everyone else? We turn it inward and we say, what do I need? What's the kindest thing I can do for myself right now? That's our little Kind Mind Academy mantra. Well, what is the kindest thing? Oh, golly, I don't know. I've never included myself in this thought before. I could help that lady get some more cushions for her back, and that lady I think might need a tissue. And oh yes, my friend over here, he definitely, I think he's forgotten his slippers. Maybe I could pop upstairs and get those for him. So all these things are quite natural for us. Usually, especially if we're in caregiving roles, they pop into our heads with ease. What we do with our retreat time is we say, I wonder if you can give that to yourself. Oh, yes, my feet are quite cold. Maybe I'll get my slippers. Actually, I would prefer to lie down rather than sit up because my back's quite sore, actually. Do you see what I mean? It's very different. And where in the world, in our lives, do we ever get that opportunity to shine a light on this type of behaviors, internal and external gestures of kindness for ourselves, our bodies, our minds, our hearts?
And yeah, having done some more general meditation retreats, I think that especially when you're practicing in a group, there can be a tendency to want to conform to the group or to practice like everybody else in the group is practicing. So if everybody else is on a cushion, you want to sit on a cushion. If everybody's cross-legged, you want to sit cross-legged. It could be very, and it can end up feeling very externally driven. Even if you're sitting in silence, meditating all day or something, there can be a way that you're not practicing compassion for yourself.
It's such a good point, Kate. The comparison mind, in it comes, it sweeps in. I'm going to be all zen and groovy. And then you sit there going, how could she sit like that for that long? Oh, I wish I could sit like that. Oh my gosh, I really like that outfit. I don't look very groovy. I've just got my leggings on. Oh, I do look a mess. And then it begins again. And actually, I think that's such a good point. I've struggled with some physical challenges for quite some time. And over time, it's become harder and harder for me to sit on a cushion, to just sit at all, actually. And so when I was invited for the first time, I remember the lovely Steve Hickman said, so get yourselves comfortable. This is in my first training. And then I realized he meant really comfortable. There's some cushions here. If you'd like to lie down. What? I could lie down. I could get comfortable. Because of course there was so much pain in my body. It was very difficult to hear meditations because the noise was, that hurts. I can't sit like that. That's too, oh no. Oh gosh, no, my back's this. And self-compassion practice really encourages you to open to self-compassion. And this is one way. We are more likely to receive compassion for ourselves if the body is relaxed. If we're tense, if we're in survival mode, if we're braced, it's going to be very hard to knock at the door of our hearts and say, hello.
But I think anything else that people might be wanting to get out of a meditation practice, if you're just miserable and in pain, it's just going to become about that. That's just going to become the focus of your meditation instead of whatever else you might be doing, whether it's self-compassion or other practices. I feel like the self-compassion can really inform so many different approaches to meditation, and it tends to be a missing element.
I so agree. And, this invitation that we can be comfortable. What do we need? Even to the point, and this was as a teacher, it can be a bit discombobulating sometimes, but I really feel passionately about it now, is say, for example, we're doing a body scan. Well, I find body scans difficult. I don't want to be focusing on my body. It hurts. And the permission we have in a self-compassion retreat, whether it's spoken or silent, they're always guided. We have guided time and we have silent time where there's less guidance. But that invitation to then not even do the meditation that's being guided, that was huge for me. And it's, oh, you mean I have permission to really meet my needs?
Mm-hmm.
You mean if I've got stirred up from the last meditation, or I'm in a bit of a pickle, I could just daydream a bit. I could look at the clouds and just let the clouds soothe me, or I could wrap myself up in my blanket and rest. Just let everything go. Let the sound of your voice just float through. And the answer is yes. And that's actually the depth of a retreat. Really practicing that. Actually, I want to stand up. I want to move around while you're guiding this meditation. Please do. Yes, you may. Actually, I don't want to be in this room at the moment. I've been all stirred up from my reflections, or maybe we give lovely teacher reflections each evening. I want to go for a walk. Well, that's going to be the kindest practice for you right now. Please do. And that can feel very difficult and uncomfortable at first, but it's very exciting to witness when someone actually really does choose for them. And that's practice. Yeah.
So when you lead a silent retreat, do you offer guidance along the way?
Absolutely. So a lot of people are really shocked. This silent retreat, I'm just going to sit there and we'll stare at each other for 5 days. No. So Liz and I will, and there are different practices, different modalities that would enjoy a retreat like that. But the silent retreats we offer through with a self-compassion and mindfulness embrace are very much gently guided practices. So there'll be either Liz or myself would guide, speak out, not so many words necessarily, but guide the meditation so people can just relax. They don't even have to try and remember, oh, well, what's giving and receiving compassion? What's that one? I mean, the mind would just go crazy. It's like, oh gosh, I can't remember what's the right thing to say. So we'll speak through a meditation and then we'll have some time of silence and reflection afterwards. And they can be with that experience. Some people like to journal. Some retreats, some teachers don't invite journaling. Again, we believe in having choice around, what's kindest if you don't normally get the chance to do that, for example. We try to mix it up. So there's movement practices. We'll remind people, guide them a little bit, say, for example, of mindful walking or soles of the feet. And then we'll say, off you go. We'll ring the bell in 25 minutes. They've had that structure, the framework to help them feel safe. And then they can go and enjoy, sense and savouring the garden. We were at the lovely Florence house down in the East Coast, Sussex, by the seaside recently. They've got lovely grounds and a rose garden and so there's that time to practice alone. Then we'll come back. The formal practices we guide, and then sometimes we can just spend some time just being quiet. Just being. We encourage everyone to turn their phones off. Now, obviously, at the moment, we're doing online retreats. The one down in Florence House was actually one that we'd booked 2 years ago. We had this little window to be able to come in person, but we're mainly doing these online retreats. So we do say, which can be harder, but phones off. We say just have the screen on, but take all the tabs off so there's nothing popping up and you're reminding you of the life outside your sacred space. We do, obviously, if you're at home and there's other people in the house, then We encourage no talking, no communication. That's why sometimes it is easier to find yourself a little cabin somewhere in the woods or something. So it is absolutely letting go of all stimuli.
I
So no
see.
reading, no listening to music, anything that would busy the mind and distract the mind,
Right.
especially our phones. So we take a lot of care making sure that all our participants have given us emergency numbers, or because if they've got their phone off, what happens if someone needs to be contacted? So we want to make the experience to feel as safe and supportive as possible, so that literally their mind chatter, their worrisome thoughts can be released. They can just let go of everything and tend to themselves.
It's reminding me of the instruction about not too tight, not too loose around meditation practice. And it feels like this offers a lot of looseness, but still a structure, which I think is really valuable, because I think, again, sometimes people who like to be busy and productive and all of that tend to be more attracted maybe to very structured retreats and programs that like are very demanding and like minute by minute kind of scheduled. So having the space, to sort of say, well, we've got structure for you, but in this hour, the structure is not structured. What do you do with yourself when you have an hour to just be and not fill it with distraction or busyness?
Yes, exactly. And it can be really difficult. And that's, of course, when we pull in our self-compassion practice. Oh, this is a moment of difficulty. I don't know how to make a choice for myself. Oh, that's really sad. Oh, I feel ashamed. Oh, that's embarrassing. Or whatever the emotion is. Now, this is all going on internally. Of course, they can reach out if it's really difficult. But then it's the gentle exploration. Well, what if you could play right now with some coloring pens? What if you could rest on your bed and tuck yourself in with Teddy? What would you like to drink? Would it be a hot drink or a cold drink right now? And I wonder what it would be like to savor that drink and really enjoy it just because you've made it for you.
So it's an opportunity to spend 5 full days sort of in an MSc infused life. What would that be like as opposed to practicing here and there?
Exactly. It's a deep immersion. It's really very powerful, can be quite intense, or it can be complete ease. Each person experiences it very differently. And what's also surprising, and this was my experience, my first silent retreat, self-compassion silent retreat, is the bond between us, even online, is incredibly rich. There is this connection, understanding our common humanity, being together. And I'm such close and deep friends with my friend Julia, who's now actually, we ended up training together. We were on this silent retreat. I sat next to her for 5 days, saying nothing, worrying that I was being a fidget most of the time and disturbing her. And the bond is amazing. There's something that happens in silence that changes everything. And it's so nourishing. And it's something that, well, if we think about our everyday living, when is there silence? When is there this cocoon of kindness that we can rest in? We say, oh, well, we'll go on holiday. Well, then we usually get busy with sightseeing. Exactly.
I'm going to channel what I imagine would be resistance, which is really the sort of resistance to self-compassion in general, but especially as I sort of imagine people thinking about doing even a whole day, let alone a whole 5-day retreat, is like, this sounds really self-indulgent. I'm just doing whatever I want for 5 whole days, like just whatever I need, like that kind of thing. I mean, I have a response to that as well. As I hear myself saying it, I could sort of say, well, have you ever done that even for a day? Like, so it would be really potentially valuable for people to have that experience and experience the resistance to it as well. Could be really valuable. But I wonder what your thoughts might be on that.
Oh, it's such a common objection. I mean, self-compassion, full stop. oh no, I'll lose all my motivation. Everyone will think I'm just so self-indulgent and selfish. Selfishness is a huge issue.
Yes, yeah.
I can't possibly do that. What will other people think of me? The judgments, we always address this, especially when we're doing, say, teacher trainings and we're saying, right, we've got a day together. We're going to, what do you think is going to happen? Oh, we're just going to be sitting, navel gazing. We're going to be just,
Right.
self-indulgently omming, or, all of these stereotypical misconceptions about what this is going to do for us. And of course, what it does, it calms down part of the brain, the amygdala just can be soothed. We can come out of survival mode. We spend all our time trying to adapt to all the new dinosaurs in our lives. We may not have spears and we're chasing after the saber-toothed tigers anymore, but those tigers are chasing us in so many different forms now. And of course, the importance is, well, how do I want to be with my children? How do I want to be with my friends? Do I want to be reactive in the office and get snarly with a neighbor just because they've parked a little bit over my driveway, or whatever it is? And all these build up, they build up over time. And I'd often talk about, that elastic band. How far can we be stretched until we snap? And usually we snap at the people that we really love the most. And so this is the antithesis of selfishness. This is the biggest gift. I wish I'd known this when I was a young mum, before I became a parent, actually, so that I would give myself some time, instead of time out, time in, to gather myself, to be quiet, to find my center, to get grounded again, so that I wasn't so in my head about what a useless mum I was being, and then get grotty and snappy at the kids because they wouldn't eat their dinner or whatever it was. That's very different. So if we turn all of those objections around and say, well, how will you be if you did attend to your needs just for a little while?
So I think there's also this thing about, again, I'm sort of channeling the sort of experience that I have with meditation, outside of self-compassion. And there's this tendency, I think, to judge a quality of a retreat by like how austere it is, or how like self-negating it is, right? That you go on retreat to sort of not meet your needs, right? That like the point of it is that it's hard, right? Or that you're, somehow self-sacrificing, or like I said, sort of austere. So this feels like a really different kind of practice from that, in a way that personally I think is very valuable, because I think we get sort of attached to that austerity or self-denial in a way that doesn't really serve anyone.
No, you're right. It really doesn't. And it's not a badge of honor.
Right.
Actually being with ourselves is challenging enough, because when are we? To learn the skill of being kind to ourselves, this is the biggest gift I think we can give our world. Because when we are kind to ourselves, when we respect ourselves, when we listen to our needs, when we give ourselves what we need, and I don't mean in a selfish way. I don't mean it's just all about me. I mean in a really conscious manner. We are modeling and giving our community, our friends, family, what if you listened, and instead of being told, oh, you need to have a rest, or you need to eat better, or you need to go and do some exercise. Oh, sweetheart, how are you feeling? What's really here? What's the kindest thing for you right now? Because actually I'm not you and I don't know. I'm here to help you, but what do you need? That's strength. That's not selfishness. That's true compassion and love and kindness to another human being. And I know that whilst I'm quite naturally empathetic and compassionate, I didn't have the depth of true listening, true allowance of another human being's experience that I do now, and to remind them that they do know if they but listen. Back to Rumi's quote,
So this is a very different kind of silent retreat, because otherwise the term evokes for me sort of a boot camp experience where I have to it's an endurance test. Yeah. Whereas this is more soaking and really absorbing compassion into all parts of one's life.
Absolutely. There's so much. I mean, that's the beauty of Kristen Neff and so many other researchers now. They have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, self-compassionate people are more likely to cope with stress and trauma, such as divorce or serious illness. They're more likely to say sorry in a relational conflict. They're more likely to get up and try again when they failed. I'm really interested in that aspect, especially for young people, that they don't beat themselves up, that they can start again and not judge themselves that they're bad, wrong, or rubbish. There's so many things. We know that it decreases depression, anxiety, all these sleep disorders or the consequences of those type of mental disturbances. It's really powerful stuff. And there's more and more evidence that it is life-changing. It is a transformational process, how you respond to your everyday experience.
Wonderful. And if our listeners are interested in either this retreat or just hearing more about you and your work, where can they go? How can they find you?
Yes, so we have our new website coming up, hopefully in a week or so, we'll see. But you can find information on kindmindacademy.com. And there's always a little, if it's not quite ready for launch, people can come and say hi and we can communicate through the little welcome box. But hopefully there'll be all the information you could possibly need coming soon to a screen near you. Great. Yeah, and we have a Facebook page as well, so you're very welcome to connect with us there as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming back to our show and chatting with us a bit today about self-compassion and deep practice. Thank you so much.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, Kate. Thank you, Alex.
Bye-bye.
I've loved it. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening today.
If you enjoyed this episode, we hope you'll hit subscribe, leave us a great rating or review, and spread the word. You can also go to noblemindpodcast.com to join our email list. You'll get a weekly behind-the-scenes message, news, announcements, and other special goodies we come up with just for you. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.